What does Andrej Karpathy's recent proclamation about using large language models have to do with Tesla's full self-driving, and how might it end up being an Achilles heel for Tesla's full self-driving? Well, all of that and more in today's episode, so let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am going to start with a post from Dr. Scott Walter. Here, I'll put this down here. Left turn on red, gone ballistic. Anyway, so I blew this up really big so you can see it because it's difficult to download things off of X, unfortunately. But we're going to look at a full self-driving scenario where it clearly fails. It attempts to make a left turn on a red light. You will see right up at the beginning, he kind of front loads this and then he goes back and rewinds it. But so let's go ahead and look, and you can see that the vehicle begins to move forward and then Scott disengages it. And if we move down to the full video, we'll be able to see the context of this. You can see that the light changes and the car is the first car in the line, which is where the Tesla full self-driving most often has issues, when it's in the lead car. If it's behind, it's smart enough to understand. Anyway, 10X obviously waiting through the light. And then what's going to happen is you're going to see just before the light changes green with the left turn arrow that the other vehicles are about to start driving. And here it's coming up any second here. Yeah, so the vehicle begins to go just at the moment when the other cars are beginning to go. In other words, it was kind of anticipating that we were going to get a green arrow this direction. That's basically what you can see here. If you rewatch it again, you can see the car begins to go forward. It actually kind of has timed the light out. It's like it sort of knows how long this light is, and it's like, okay, the light should be turning green right about now. It is also possible that it does what I do. I can't see outside of this field of view, but I very often look at the lights to the side of me to see if you see them green, right? And then you see yellow and red and you're like, okay, it's my turn. So the likelihood is that one of the pillar cameras or something is able to pick up the lights going the other direction, and it saw them go from green to yellow to red, and then it anticipated that the light was going to change from red to green for it. It was going to get the left turn signal, because this is a very common scenario, at least in the United States and where I drive, is that if you have these protected lefts, what usually happens is the first thing that happens when the lights change is that usually both of the left turn arrows go off at the same time. So you'll have left turn, right, and then those things will change to yellow and then to red, and then the main lights will go to green. So you can sort of see what FSD was sort of thinking about this, but it was anticipating things. It was like, I'm going to go now. Now, admittedly, I have done this myself before and kind of lurched forward and then had to stop because I'm like, oh, whoops, the light sequence didn't work the way I thought it was going to. But here's the issue with that. That is imitating, let's say, less than stellar human driving. It should always understand that we will not go until the light turns green. And yeah, humans make mistakes in this sort of realm all the time, but the vehicle has to be better. So this takes us back to a post from Andrej Karpathy from 3 weeks ago, where he says, there's a new kind of coding I call, quote, vibe coding, where you fully give in to the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget the code even exists. And I've done this before with ChatGPT and stuff. It's really fun. You just go like, hey, generate me this, you run it, you're like, not quite, and you iterate, right? That's the kind of vibe coding. You don't even really have to look at the code itself. You just like, yeah, is it working approximately the way I want it to? I wouldn't do this for a real project, obviously, but for fun things where I just want to develop something quickly, it's like, well, this is great. It works really fast. It's like having a super fast coding assistant where you don't really have to pay any attention to the actual code. You just look at how it runs. Anyway, Andrej continues, it's possible because the LLMs, e.g. Cursor Composer with Sonnet, and by the way, I use Replit with Sonnet, that works really well, and also Grok and ChatGPT, for example, are getting too good. Also, I just talked to Composer with Super Whisper, so I barely even touch the keyboard. I ask for the dumbest things like decrease the padding on the sidebar by half because I'm too lazy to find it. I accept all always. I don't read the diffs anymore, which is very true. You get to the point where you're just like, you click the accept all button, makes the changes, and you see what happens. And again, I do this myself all the time. When I get error messages, I just copy and paste them with no comment. Usually that fixes it. The code grows beyond my usual comprehension. I'd have to really read through it for a while to understand it. That's true even for something like when I have it generate a tesseract that's animated. It's it's reasonably complicated on a mathematical level. It's not that complicated on the code level, but you can get to projects where it actually does some pretty complicated stuff, and it would take a while to get into it and understand exactly how the code works. Anyway, Andrej finishes up here. Sometimes the LLMs can't fix a bug, so I just work around it or ask for random changes until it goes away. It's not too bad for throwaway weekend projects, exactly, but still quite amusing. I'm building a project or web app, but it's not really coding. I just see stuff, say stuff, run stuff, and copy paste stuff, and it mostly works. And notice down here, I say this is oddly a flow state. It's really cool once you get into it. It is kind of a flow state. You're just like kind of vibing with ChatGPT or with Grok or with Replit plus Sonnet, whatever that situation is. You just kind of vibe with it and you don't really have to worry about the code itself. Very, very different than anything I've ever experienced in terms of coding because, of course, previous to that, I just had to do it myself, which means I would have to get into the weeds and figure out why something didn't work. Do you ever feel like life just keeps moving faster? One day you've got all the energy in the world, the next you realize coffee just isn't cutting it anymore. Yep, I've been there. That's why 2 years ago I made a simple change, one that actually stuck. I started drinking AG1 every morning, and let me tell you, this stuff just works. AG1 is my go-to for daily nutrition. One scoop once a day delivers 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics, and adaptogens, all in one easy drink. No pills, no complicated routines, just mix, drink, and move on with your day. I've been drinking AG1 for over 2 years now, and I love how it supports my energy levels and my digestion. For example, AG1 contains B vitamins that support energy without the caffeine crash. It also has prebiotics and probiotics that work together to help with digestion and keep things running smoothly, if you know what I mean. AG1 has gone through 52 iterations, refining the formula over the years to make it even more effective. It's science-driven, constantly improved, and designed to help you feel your best. And the taste? I honestly love it. No sugar, no weird artificial junk, just a smooth, slightly sweet drink I look forward to every morning. So if you've been thinking about dialing in your health this year, this is the easiest step you can take. Go to drinkag1.com/drknowitall or scan the QR code on the screen to get $20 off your first subscription. A big thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video and to you for watching, and now let's get back to it. All right, so what does this have to do with Scott's drive and actually a drive that I do all the time? I take a little back route around the mall that's kind of a decrepit mall, but anyway, I go around the back way to avoid a bunch of lights. If you've seen my full self-driving videos, talked about that a whole bunch of times. But on the way home, there is a stop sign, a legit stop sign. It's actually in the road, big octagonal stop sign thing. It's not one of those painted things on the road, and it's going out onto a major road, and the car insists on rolling that stop sign every time in the Model Y now. Only that stop sign, no other stop signs. It's literally the exact same thing that I do when I drive through that intersection myself. And hypothetically, at least, if any police are watching, hypothetically, I might roll that stop sign all the time because you have immense visibility in both directions. You can see for forever in both directions. And it's just the way that I drive that. And here's the thing, because it's such an unusual back route and there are very few people that take it, I am probably very overrepresented in the data set that Tesla is training on for that particular stop sign, because there's probably not that many Teslas that drive that direction and take that weird back road and go through that stop sign. So what we're talking about here is that full self-driving is basically doing vibe driving. It's like, how does the aggregate of humans that drive through this area actually drive? And if you have a biased data set where maybe only 1 or 2 humans actually drive through that area, the vehicle itself will begin to take on the behavior of just a couple of people. You could have outlier situations rather than the common aggregate. Now, as Elon and Ashok talked about in August of 2023, I think it was that long ago, gosh, that's a year and a half ago at this point, when they did their drive, Ashok actually talked about 0.5% of people actually come to full stops at stop signs. And so even in the general aggregate, most people roll stop signs, but I think under most circumstances, they are able to find people who actually stop at stop signs for most stop signs. So they're able to be like, when you come up to this intersection, actually come to a full stop. But this particular stop sign where I go is probably only represented by 1 or 2 or 3 Teslas that actually drive that route consistently. So you've got an incredibly biased sampling set, and maybe 0 people actually come to a full stop when there's nobody, coming from either direction. So there you've got a data set where literally there are no people that actually come to a full stop at that stop sign. And how are you going to overcome that? The car is going to vibe drive like the humans that it's trained on. And if there are no humans that are driving, correctly according to the letter of the law, how is it going to learn to do that other stuff? And here again, if we re-watch this part from Scott's video, you can see that the vehicle is vibe driving. It's like, I see what's supposed to happen. I think I understand how I'm going to behave in this situation because I've seen people do this over and over and over again. They anticipate the light, probably, again, like I said, I can't see over here. If we had the side camera, we could see if we could see this light, but almost guaranteed you would be able to see the light on the right-hand side, and you would be able to see it go from green to yellow to red, and then you can anticipate a couple of seconds of delay before that left turn arrow would go on. And the car is just basically going like, the left turn arrow is going to turn right now, and it starts going through, and then it has to disengage. So here again, the problem is probably that in aggregate, humans drive in a way that's slightly anticipatory of the actual light changing. They're like, oh, the light is about to change. I can see the green to yellow to red on the cross traffic, and so I know that it's my turn coming up, and I'm going to anticipate that. And so this is another instance of vibe driving over actually, adhering to the rules. And this is actually a significant problem. This could be, like I said in the intro, an Achilles heel of Tesla's full self-driving, because it's only vibe driving. It doesn't really understand. They trained it end to end on data. It doesn't understand. It doesn't have a rule book that says when the light is red, don't go. It just picked this up from watching human drivers drive. And so because there's no actual reasoning going on behind the hood, there's no symbolic reasoning, there's no ability to conceptualize and think about this stuff in a more abstract manner, the vehicle is always going to be stuck doing these things like vibe driving under these sorts of circumstances. And what that means, if that's not resolvable, is that the car will never be able to do completely full self-driving, like fully autonomous, robo-taxi type drives where nobody is sitting in the driver's seat. So that is the problem statement. Let me know if you agree in the comments, whether you think that I'm on the right track here or on the wrong track. But I see this as a significant problem and a barrier to getting to 100% or 99.9999999% drivability, because the vehicle is going to always be just imitating humans rather than actually learning the real rules, because it has no kind of external symbolic reasoning capability. So what is the solution here? In my mind, the solution for this is reinforcement learning. We've been talking a lot about that recently on my channel, and many other people have done that as well. If you want to see a recent video about RL, you can see it up here. But anyway, using reinforcement learning would be to put the vehicle into a simulated circumstance like this. Tesla has the capability to regenerate this scene in simulation and run it over and over again, and essentially create punishment scenarios when, if the vehicle moves before the light turns green, you hit it with the proverbial ruler on the hand and say, bad AI, right? And you can run scenarios like this. You can run millions or billions of these scenarios with the vehicle in simulation in very photorealistic environments, different times of day, different times of night, different weather conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And you can do some sort of reinforcement learning to force it to not turn on the, when the signal is red. Or in the case of my rolled stop sign, to teach it to not roll through that stop sign, even though in the case of 100% of the data sources, people do roll through it, but you can add a punishment where it's like, nope, you just rolled through, you didn't come to 0 miles per hour before you continued on. So in my mind, gamifying this, putting it in a virtual environment, letting it play itself with a reward system that's, pretty straightforward in this case. It's either come to a complete stop at a stop sign or do not begin to accelerate. Don't start to go until the light actually turns green for you. Once you have a reward system like this, you can put the vehicle into simulation. You can simulate millions of, very similar sorts of circumstances and train it. But the issue with this is there's always going to be a corner case that you haven't caught yet. Some weird thing where there's not a lot of data contrary to the behavior that humans do, and the behavior that humans are doing is illegal or dangerous or something is wrong with it. And you're always going to be playing catch up with, like, can you actually get to the point where you can train the vehicle to behave legally? Because the problem is that you don't have what every human has at 16 years old or 15 years old. When you do your written test, you have to do a written test that says, I understand conceptually that when I see a red octagonal sign, I have to come to a complete stop at the white line, and then I have to continue on. Or my tread depth has to be at least, I think it was in a penny with Lincoln's head showing or something like that, right? 1/16 of an inch. But anyway, you have these things where we have conceptual ideas of what's going on here. And even if we humans disobey the rules and kind of fudge them, we ultimately know what the rules are, which of course is why we're responsible. If a police car picks you up for rolling a stop sign, it's like, oh, well, everybody does it. Nobody actually comes to a stop, but we all know fully well that it's illegal according to the letter of the law. But the problem with a fully end-to-end neural network is that it doesn't really have that kind of concept. It doesn't have an external concept of this is illegal and this is why. It's just like, I've seen lots of data and people always do this at this particular point, so I will do this. That is an entirely different way of understanding it. It's a little difficult to imagine, but the best analogy I can think of for a human would be if you took an infant, right, raised from birth, and you never told them anything. You never explained any rules about the road. They never had to take a driving test, but they would sit in the car with their parents and they would watch them drive. They would observe. Eventually, once you put them behind the wheel, they would probably be relatively effective drivers, but they wouldn't have a solid conceptual sense of why particular rules are being followed in particular circumstances. And for example, the fact that their parents always rolled stop signs would mean that this person would just assume that a stop sign meant you're just supposed to slow down a little bit and then continue on if nobody else is in the area. So they wouldn't have a solid conceptual grounding. In other words, exactly what Andrej Karpathy is talking about with coding. It's kind of vibe coding. You're not actually looking at the code. You're just sort of vibing with it and seeing if you get out of it what you expect to get out of it. That's going to take you a very long way. Vibe driving will take you a very long way, but it's not going to get you 100% to fully legal driving that doesn't ultimately break the law, or even worse, do something dangerous like attempt to make a left turn when the light hasn't actually turned green yet. So can reinforcement learning work for this? Yes, it can. Will it work for this? I don't know, because I just don't know how many edge cases there are in the world. I suspect that there are many, many, many edge cases in the world. And when you're trying to learn something, the lack of conceptual knowledge that goes along with behavioral knowledge is going to be a big detriment to Tesla's full self-driving going forward, and any other autonomous type of driving situation, or honestly, any type of humanoid robot interaction with humans. That is all going to be problematic. Now, of course, the ultimate way to solve this is to have a two-layered system, sort of like Figure AI's Helix. And if you haven't seen that video, you should definitely check that out. But basically, Helix has two compute modes going on. It's got a low-level compute mode, which you could think of as analogous to the full self-driving, where it's just, standing upright and making sure the motors and actuators are moving properly and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's got a higher level reasoning sort of capability that is based on a large language model, a very large model that can take in video, it can take in language, and it can rationalize about that in a more abstract sort of context. And ultimately, if we really want to nail down 100% legal driving, I think that's the only way to do it, is to create a bifurcated system where you've got Tesla's full self-driving, but then on top of that is a kind of a judger or a thing like that that's kind of sitting watching. Maybe you could think about it as a driving instructor that's, watching the driving student going like, are you driving okay? Are you driving okay? And if the student makes a mistake, the instructor goes, no, stop, don't do that right now, right? And so it stops the student from making the mistake. So as we move forward with this, in particular the Model Y and Model 3, which are very, very advanced in their full self-driving capabilities, pay attention to these edge cases and any potential announcements from Tesla's AI team about how they're handling this sort of situation. If you see them talking about adding a rationalization layer on top, that in my mind would be the ultimate solution, and the fallback to that would be if they talk about doing a lot of reinforcement learning to train better behavior in these edge cases. Either one of those is a really good sign, and I think both of those are going to be necessary for Tesla to get to as close to 100% perfect driving as possible. Alrighty folks, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do like it and consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. And finally, a big thanks once again to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to click my link in the description to get $20 off your first subscription, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.